Okay, once you've inserted your sound files, what you need to do is do a little bit of trimming, because each program that you ever use, when it exports audio, it adds a different amount of silence to the beginning of the audio file. So how to do it is you double click on the title of the sound. So if I just zoom in a little bit so you can see that I'm clicking on the title, like not in the sound itself, but on the title. And the bottom sound tab window will sort of zoom up. Yeah. And then down here there's buttons for further zooming. So what I want to do is zoom in horizontally. I'm using my mouse button, but anyway, so you want to really zoom in. And you can see how there's this flat line there. That's silence. What you want to do is cut it off. So you have to make sure snap is off so you've got good control of the loop start. And you just drag it really neatly until you can get as close as possible without actually chopping off the sound to the start of the sound. And then zoom back out and double check the other end. That looks pretty good. And so that's pretty much all you do. You minimize it and you do it again to the next loop. See, this one's bigger, the amount of silence. It's just a slightly annoying part of these programs. So you just have to make sure you've done it to each sound. Now you might think, oh, well, won't it all just come out in the wash because they've all got silence on them? But it doesn't, because Sibelius and Beatcraft work differently. And if you don't trim off the sounds for the Jam Studio and Beatcraft files, you'll find everything is out of synchronization. So it'll sort of sound together, but it'll sound really horrible and messy. So typically that's your problem when you've got some sort of synchronization issue. It's that you haven't trimmed the beginning to start exactly on the bar line. Like if I were to just go here to one that I haven't trimmed, I should be able to see it here. Here's a good example, and I'm going to stretch it a little bit so you can see what's going on. So can you see how, because I trimmed off the silence, the loop has bled over into the next bit and started again? So I want to trim that back to the end of itself, and I want to get rid of the front of this, yeah? I mean, and the easiest way to do it is just to go in here and trim it off. And then you can see that this thing finishes hopefully on a bit of silence. If you're a bit worried about the loop end, you can also go right to the end and check it out. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It might be that the loop has actually finished there. But I'll just show you what I mean. See how that's not quite right? That white line is the end of the loop. So there's a lot of funny little tricks you can do to try and sort of overcome these synchronization issues, and it becomes really sort of irritating, to be truthful. But it can be also quite time consuming, which I'm sure you don't want. But you can see if I can change the adjustment, but it's just too tiny. I could do 100.05 maybe, and see if that, or maybe 100.1 might be a good amount. I'm trying to get this line to match perfectly with the bar line. Maybe 100.15. Ah, that's perfect, almost, you know. That's about as good as I'm going to get. So, look, you don't need to be quite that perfect. It looks like it's rounded up to 100.2 in time stretch. But this is the sort of fiddling that you'll inevitably have to do. And in a real recording situation, this would be the job of the sound engineer. Yeah, you just lay down the audio tracks and you wouldn't do all of the final production work, but because you're learning music, you do need to learn how to do that. So the necessary and compulsory thing is to make sure you've taken the silence off the start of the track. That's the biggest problem. Then step 2, you go into the spot where the two loops mix, and you make sure that you don't accidentally have the end of the thing starting again. Can you see how that's starting again? That white line means it's starting again, which you don't actually want, yeah? So ideally, you want to edit the sound, and I'm thinking maybe 100.2 is what we need. That seems to have fixed my problem. So my white line, if I just drag it, you can see is exactly on the bar line, and so that means I can resize it and it'll finish exactly on the bar line. You can see this one needs its beginning trimmed off. So to go into the sound file and trim it. So this trimming of the beginning and the ends is one of the main reasons why you want to make each thing in 8 or 4 bar chunks or even smaller. Only MIDI files will align naturally and perfectly, but audio files will always have a bit of trimming that's